Hi, I'm Shira Rubinoff, and I'm here with Mazin, Manager, Partnerships, Strategic Accounts from Memcyco. And Ido brings a wealth of knowledge on the fraud pandemic that has affected retail, finance, charity, and even more industries. So Ido, pleasure to be with you here today, and you certainly are the right person here for this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Shira.
No, certainly. And today's focus is impersonation fraud, a cunning chameleon that adapts its colors to deceiving various actions. So today we're going to dissect the tactics of these frauds and discuss cutting-edge strategies to combat them. So Ido, what is digital impersonation fraud and what are its implications?
Yeah, digital impersonation fraud are a type of fraud that leverage the use of impersonating channels in order to deceive their victims into thinking that they're communicating and interacting with the legitimate, authentic source. And the way these attacks usually start is by the act of luring the victims into the impersonating channels. And these impersonating channels can come in different forms and variants. A few common ones are SSO impersonations, single sign-on, whether it's Okta, Microsoft. Another common type is social media impersonations. We also see a lot of native apps impersonations. So you download the native apps from the App Store or the Google Store, thinking it's your local brand, banks or post offices app, but it's actually a fake. But the most prevalent impersonating channels and the ones that we see targeting verticals all across the board are website impersonations.
No, very interesting. And I think that's social engineering and phishing at its best, really trying to get in the center of tricking the human to doing things that are not good and causing harm, not just to them, but to their organizations as well. And Ido, can you provide examples of website impersonation use cases from different industries? And I know it hits pretty much every industry. It's not just one space needs to be careful, it's everybody. Anybody and everybody who are out there that are doing anything online needs to be aware of this. So some examples I think would be very important for our audience to hear from you.
Yeah, certainly. And that's what's interesting about these attacks is that they're targeting an array of verticals across the board. When every attack has different intentions and a different end goal, and that dictates what the attack will actually look like. And what we're also seeing, and this is a very interesting thing about working here, is that when we start working with a new vertical, we start sometimes discovering use cases that we didn't even know exist and we didn't come to solve, and also use cases that the organization weren't aware of. But to give you a few use cases and examples, so I would say the financial vertical is very much up there in impersonation attacks, and we see two very potent use cases. One is account takeover, where a bad actor lures its victims into the impersonating channel in order to harvest login details. And then after he managed to harvest a list of compromised credentials, he would then sell it on the dark web for other bad actors to do the account takeover or do the account takeover himself. And once he enters the compromised account, he can then empty its money into different mule accounts and such. So that's a very prevalent attacks in financials. But another very potent use case there is just simple credit card theft. So instead of compromising the credential, they're directly compromising the credit card information and then either using this to do fraud or sell it on the dark web. Another industry that we see being targeted a lot is the retail vertical. And what's interesting there, the use case is not account takeover or credit card theft, at least not the primary use case. It still does exist. But what we see there, we see a lot of fake stores, the selling of counterfeit goods. We see bad actors convincing the victims that they are interacting with the authentic Greek clothing brand or supermarket brand. And when they make an order in this impersonating site, they expect to get a delivery in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But then in reality, what happens, they're waiting 2, 3, 4 weeks, but nothing arrives in their mail. And nothing will arrive in their mail because they just pay the bad actor without knowing. So, and in this process as well, the bad actor might have captured the credentials on top of stealing the money directly. And in a lot of cases, we see the victims complain to the organization, and the organization is not even aware that this site existed. We also see in retail the selling of fake gift cards and fake vouchers. Depending on the organization, they name it differently, but it's essentially the same thing, where bad actors are selling fake vouchers and fake gift cards to customers of that brand. And when these customers try to use the gift cards, it either shows an error that this gift card has been used, or that this gift card is just plain invalid. So this is a very prevalent attack that we see across the retail vertical. In terms of other verticals, we have post offices, and that's the infamous scam that I think is the most common one. And most people know about this scam, even people that aren't in touch with the cyber world, because they try to target a big chunk of a country in the hopes that some people are actually expecting to receive mail or a package. So when they receive this message, it's in many cases likely for them to pay this because they're actually expecting to receive a package.
No, those were very important points you shared with our audience, and certainly that's something everybody could relate to. And I think these things that we've been talking about over the last little while have been so important in the industry, and not just the cybersecurity world, but everybody out there. And I think even bank fraud and some of the retail, the areas that you're highlighting, is very personal. And I think that everybody I know everybody has to deal with this type of situation and worry and be sure that they're protected in a way that's meaningful in real time. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I need to get to something super important, which is how can we fight website impersonation? And I know that's something that people talk about all the time, like what do you do? We know what the problem is, but what can be done now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the thing with website impersonation, what we've been seeing is that this problem has sort of been neglected by organizations in the last couple of years, because of the fact that organizations have been using solutions that are pretty old, that have been developed 5, 10, 20 years ago. And these were good solutions at the time. But what happened is bad actors found a few gaps in these solutions and heavily exploited them, to the point that we're seeing that these attacks are growing exponentially because these gaps are still open for them. So to see how we can solve this problem, we need to look at how organizations are trying to solve this problem today. And there are two major ways that organizations take action with to solve these problems nowadays. One is by practicing and exercising education campaigns to their client base and employees, which is always important to educate and raise awareness regarding security, of course. But we're seeing that this solution is not that effective, because we also need to take into consideration that these types of attacks target all age gaps, for example. So, for example, I really highly doubt that my grandma, if she accesses an impersonating site, that she'll be able to tell the difference between a legitimate SSL certificate and a fake one. So that's why this solution hasn't been so effective. And the second one is organizations have been adopting and onboarding threat intelligence solutions, which are very good solutions, an important solution to an organization, but they address a broad array of problems. And one of the things they try to cover is website impersonation, but they don't focus on that. And the way these solutions work is they scan the web, the deep web, the dark web, the mainstream web. They look for lookalike domains via either lookalike domains or based on the content within the impersonating sites. Once they find these impersonating sites, they submit to take them down. And that is a manual process. They need to call up the registries and provide them with evidence. And that process can take time from the point they launch these attacks until they're taken down. So with this, there are two major gaps that still exist today regarding these attacks. One is that organizations have zero visibility into these attacks. Today, organizations cannot know when an attack is launched as soon as it's launched. Organizations cannot know the size of these attacks. How many of their customers, employees are they targeting? Organizations cannot know who are they targeting? Who are these attacks targeting? What are the names of the customers that they're targeting? Organizations cannot know how these attacks were created. So ultimately, organizations are completely blind to these attacks. That's one thing. The second gap is that organizations cannot protect their victims or their customers or their employees. The first reason being simply because they do not know who they are. So how are they supposed to protect them? And secondly, if these organizations do choose threat intelligence solutions, from the moment these solutions detect these attacks until they take them down, given that they detect them because they miss a lot of them, that can take days, weeks, sometimes even months. Sometimes it's impossible to take them down. And during this, we call it window of exposure. During this window of exposure, the victims of these organizations are exposed to the attack, and there's nothing the organizations can do to protect them. So organizations, I believe, should look for solutions that can close these two gaps for them. Firstly, by providing full visibility into these attacks and provide insight to their fraud operations team and to their cyber operations team so they can take action upon these attacks. And secondly, organizations need to onboard solutions that can protect their customer base, their employee base, and all the victims that enter these scams.
No, those are very important points that you highlighted. And certainly I think, another thing that you highlighted earlier on was a lot of stuff that's been out there is outdated. And as technology advances and the bad actors advance in terms of technology, of their speed, of their way to get in, technology needs to advance too, and using what was old and previously used is no longer good across the industry. So thank you for those points, and I think they're very important for our audience to understand and to hear, and to really make sure the right technology is in place that's not outdated, because then their solutions and their security is outdated and nobody needs that or wants that. So Ido, thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure our audience really enjoyed your insight, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Shira.
Thank you.